What zone are we in? What growing zone?
We are in zone 5. Zone 5 basically means here in the United States we get nighttime temperatures in the wintertime, low temperatures, -10 to -20 degrees. Now, this winter was actually a little bit unusual. We had, depending on where you were in our county up here, we had temperatures actually get down anywhere from -21 to -28 degrees.
And that's -28 degrees Fahrenheit, not Celsius.
Right.
Big difference.
Yeah, big difference.
When
yeah.
you're -28 Fahrenheit,
yeah,
you're pretty chilly if you're going by Celsius.
I'm not good on the metrics, so I don't know offhand what the
Well, 0 degrees Celsius is actually equivalent to 32 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right. I know it sounds a lot more impressive if I gave the negative in Celsius, but you know, I'm not all that up on my metrics. But it was,
well, in all fairness, that was a very harsh strip of cold weather for us.
It was very, very, very cold for, you know, this particular winter. Now, luckily, at the time that we had those cold temperatures, we had a lot of snowfall on the ground, and snow actually helps to insulate your plants. Snow is actually your best friend in the wintertime. When we get those extremely cold temperatures and you don't have the snow, what happens is the frost really starts going deep, and you know the problem is it can really kill off the roots of your plant. Not to mention, I mean, the above ground parts of the plant, but the roots.
So that blanket of snow is just that. It's like a blanket of insulation over the ground.
It's insulation, yeah. Well, you know, let's take a walk out into the garden center. You can see the way, you know, we have a lot of plant material here, and when anyone who's in the garden center business, when they see the way that we have these plants overwintered, they'd probably scream and pull their hair out. But gardening isn't an exact science. It's what works for you. And I'll show you the way that we have our plants overwintered, which most people would say, oh God, that's the worst thing that you can do. But for us here, it works, and it works extremely well. So let's take a quick walk out to the garden center.
Okay, now before we take off, just to clarify something, when we're talking about our victory garden, a lot of that we don't have to be concerned about winter snowfall because we're going to harvest it at the end of the season, and it doesn't become an issue.
It doesn't become an issue with many things, but there's certain things that you can actually plant in the fall for the following year. One of which is garlic. Garlic is
a big thing around here too.
Right. A lot of people will plant garlic in the fall. They actually get a much better yield the following year if you plant your garlic in the fall as opposed to planting it in the spring, because there again, it's a root crop. Your root crops actually will grow in the ground over the winter. There's certain things like potatoes. If you have, you know, small, you know, the little potatoes, the ones that you're not necessarily going to eat, some people will actually save those for seed. Now, if you store them indoors, you're guaranteed that they're not going to freeze and rot. But I've actually had results where we've actually left them in the ground, mulched over the ground with a considerable amount of straw, and they've actually grown back the following year. And over the winter time, they actually started to sprout roots and continue to grow and strengthen the overall plant over the winter.
So what you're saying is people can't be afraid to experiment a little bit.
Definitely not. Gardening is not an exact science. This isn't, you know, this isn't like a mathematical equation where 2 + 2 is always supposed to equal 4. I know there's, you know, there's computations out there where you can get it to equal something other than 4, but for the most part, everyone is of the general opinion, yes, 2 + 2 = 4. With gardening, it's not that
I think the chairman of the Fed said 2 + 2 = 22.
Yeah, well, the chairman of the Fed is wrong. Just plain wrong.
Okay, let's go outside and take a look and see what we got there. We'll be right back in just a moment. Okay, here we are.
Okay.
We're heading out to take a look at our winterized garden center. All right.
Yeah, might as well close that door behind you. It's cold.
Yeah, oh, look at this.
It's cold.
Look at...
Yep.
Oh, yeah, look at this.
It's cold. Yeah. That's just it. Typical mid-February up here. Get my coat zippered up here. Yeah.
Okay, what are we going to look at here?
Well, basically, you know, for pretty much all of our plants and stuff like that, the way we have them all overwintered. You know, we've got them in here. They're all heeled in with straw and hay and all sorts of other stuff. And yep, got a phone call. Hang on just a second.
Okay, do we want to eavesdrop on this call?
Yeah, I think you called me this morning, and anyhow. Okay, so where did we leave off? We left off with you know, winterizing the plants with the straw, and you know, and with all the snow and everything that we've had on top of them, it keeps them all nice. It keeps their, you know, once the roots of the plants freeze for the winter, they want to stay frozen. The biggest problem that plants have is if the roots constantly freeze and thaw in the fall and in the spring, and it ends up killing off the roots.
I suppose it's important that we do this now because over the course of making our little series of videos, spring will eventually arrive, and we won't have the opportunity to come out and discuss this matter, will we?
No. Hopefully spring will arrive. You know, it doesn't exactly look like it on a day like today. I mean, the next 6 days we're supposed to have snow showers. If you can kind of zoom in over on some of these little buds here, you know, you can take a look and see the plants themselves. I mean, they're just waiting for spring. The buds and everything on these guys, they haven't swelled up yet because we haven't had warm enough weather, even though we did have one day last week where it got up to the 60s. You know, but for the most part, if you can zoom in, I'll scratch the bark, because this is one way to tell if your plants are good and healthy. You know, if you take just a little piece of the bark and you just kind of take your fingernail to it.
Now move your hand out of the way.
Well, that's just it. Try. You see, you got a good piece of bark right there.
Okay, we got it.
Take the fingernail to it, and you see how it's nice and green underneath.
Let me zoom right up to that. Right. Okay, yeah, we see nice and green.
Nice and green. That's a good, healthy plant. You know, if you scratch the bark off and it's brown, it's dead. You know,
dead is bad.
Dead is bad. You know, now there again too, there's certain things that, you know, that die back to the ground every year. Certain perennials and stuff like that. Like this year, this was an ornamental grass. There's absolutely no life in the tops of this. This comes back from the roots every year. You know?
Now, take a moment and explain. A lot of people have this misconception that a perennial is something that simply drops its leaves. A perennial actually dies down to the ground. A flowering shrub leaves a living bush above the ground after the leaves drop off of it, correct?
Yeah, your perennials will die back. I mean, in this area where we have a great problem with deer, perennials are a wonderful thing, because the thing is, there's nothing for the deer to eat in the wintertime. If they eat the tops off of this, it's no big deal, because everything that's alive is coming back up from the roots every year. It's growing from below.
So what you're saying is flowering shrubs have the liability of leaving something exposed above the ground for the wildlife to browse on during the winter.
Perfect example, this little rhododendron right here.
Okay, let's zoom up to that.
You know, that little rhododendron right there is deer candy in the wintertime.
Okay.
You know, the deer love stuff like that. You know, and that's stuff that you need to protect. Down here, something that they love even more, they just absolutely cherish this, which a lot of people think because it has prickly leaves they wouldn't like. They love holly bushes here in the Northeast. They just absolutely love holly bushes. You know, and that's one thing that you definitely have to, you know, take care to wrap with burlap, put some deer netting around. I mean, there's numerous ways, you know, to help protect against the deer. We'll get into more of that in another episode. But that's just a quick look at our garden center, and such a beautiful, nice snowy day here in lovely Sullivan County, New York in mid-February.
Outstanding.